Today we'll be looking at the NRU, the structure for the upcoming season, as well as having a look at the opening games in the Marshall and in the Owl with the round two results. Welcome to Pitchline with myself, Sean Ryan Radio, the podcast dedicated to grassroots rugby across Canada. And today we're diving into the NRU as we're reflecting on the results of the Owl and the Marshall over the weekend. If you're jumping into the action and you want to know more about how the league works here in Canada, check out some of my previous episodes. We talked about the structure of the Owl, the Marshall, the TRU, Nova Scotia, Alberta. You'd get a better understanding of how it kind of works as a collective. Now, we're diving into the NRU today. We're talking about the structure. There's a small few changes in terms of teams. I will talk about my favorites to win both the men's and the women's. But overall, we've got a very exciting structure. Now, in the NRU last season, we had 8 or 9 teams. Now, I'm not saying 8 or 9 because I'm not sure if there's 8 or 9 teams in it, and I didn't do the research. We did have 8 teams. It went to 9 teams due to the fact that Georgia Bay Titans joined the league at the closer to the end of the season. I think they had 3 or 4 games. So they joined the season then. So then there was 9 teams. So you can kind of say there was 8 or 9 teams, but I think for the majority of it, it was 8 teams in terms of promotion and stuff like that. Now this season we're down to 6 because Fergus Highlanders and Georgia Bay Titans, of course, and Northallerton have moved over to the TRU. So we're going to have 6 teams this season. So super exciting, nice and compact. Those 6 teams are Sarnia Saints, Stony Creek, Stratford Black Swans, the Windsor Rogues, Hamilton Hornets, and the Norfolk Harvesters. And the final for this competition will be happening on the 29th of August for the men. Now, when you think of those teams, who do I have as favorites? Now, for my favorites, I gotta start with Sarnia Saints. Due to I know they just got demoted from the Marshall Championship. They're going to be very eager to get back up to the top spot. But they've played at a very high level of rugby for a few years in the Marshall. So they're going to bring that experience and make sure they excel and use that experience to their advantage to kind of get themselves back up to the Marshall. Now, another team to be looking at, I think this team has the potential to do exactly the same in terms of getting into the Marshall, as well as win the league, is the Norfolk Harvesters. Now, they finished second place last year. They lost to Guelph on both occasions, but Guelph isn't in the league this year because they got promoted. So their hurdle from last year isn't a hurdle anymore. So they will have that momentum against them. Be like, look, Sarnia Saints are in the mix. They're probably our biggest competitor right now. If we can win against them, we have a very good chance at promotion, as well as topping the table. So they have yet to be promoted to the Marshall, but I think this year is definitely the year for them to raise the bar and get themselves into momentum to be able to get into the Marshall. So they're definitely a team to be looking at. Now, the third team I'm picking is Stony Creek. Now, they didn't finish third place last season. They have been in the Marshall back in 2019, so just before COVID. They have a highly competitive team, being in the top 3 in the NRU since being demoted. So every year that they've been in the NRU, they've been in the top 3 spots, whether it was third, second. They haven't finished first, but they've been in third and second a few times. So they're in that competitive mode. Last year they didn't have they only came third due to the fact that they had more points. They had 3 wins, and I think the team below them had 4. So they're going to have to up their game a small bit from last year, but I think they have the capabilities of being able to compete. We've only 6 teams in the league this year, so there's only going to be 10 games that are going to be very vital for this structure. So it's going to be interesting. And it's also interesting to kind of consider how it's going to play out in terms of the getting into the bracket for getting promotion. We're still unsure of how that bracket's actually going to work with the Marshall, due to the fact that I'm under the impression that it's a 16 team McCormick Cup playoffs. So each team from the Marshall, as we discussed in previous episodes, is the playoffs. So we're wondering what way is the promotion side for that? Because last year we had the last team in the Marshall Championship, the top of the TRU, the top of the NRU, and the top of the Eastern Ontario Rugby Union. So we had those four, and they played in a semifinals, finals, and the winner got to stay up or move into the Marshall Championship. So there is that kind of question mark on how that's actually going to work. Is it going to be more of like a round robin that they play each other twice, the other two? So the TRU plays the NRU and the Eastern Ontario Rugby Union winners, and they play each other in another bracket at the end of the season, and then they see who wins, gets that spot. Because obviously if the 16th place team in the championship, if they do fantastic in the playoffs, um, that's going to tighten the window in terms of how they're going to progress in trying to get the McCormick Cup, um, as well as how are they going to play the promotion demotion sides for the Marshall Championship. So there's a big question mark around there, which I have. So if you do know the answer to that, let me know. You can email me, SeanRyanRadio@gmail.com, place to get me, or you can just send it to me on Instagram, or you can comment down below. You have the capabilities of doing so, and we get to learn more about how that works for both me and for viewers who are interested in the rugby scene here in Ontario. So interesting stuff, but I think those three teams are the teams to be looking at. I think they are the teams that have the best opportunity. Now we could see the other three absolutely kill it this year and change everything. But just based on last few seasons and culture and all that sort of stuff, they're the three that I'd be looking at. Now, in the women's, we have 9 teams in the league, which is really massive. There's going to be bye weeks for some of these, or for one team each week. So we're going to have the Niagara Wasps in the league, the Norfolk Harvesters, Stratford Black Swans, the Oakville Crusaders, Stony Creek, Hamilton Hornets, Sarnia Saints, Fergus Highlanders, and Iroquois Roots, as well as the other team that's going to be introduced. They're the first season for them, so we're having 2 new teams with obviously Georgian Bay Titans. I'm considering this year as their first season being introduced to the scene in Ontario, which is pretty cool. So, who do I have in favorites for the women's? I've gone for yellow and black. All 3 teams are going to be yellow and black here, as their colors, strangely enough. But I think these are the 3 teams to be looking out for. First one, Niagara Wasps. I think they have a 99% chance of topping the table if they're the same team that they are last year and they play exactly the same way as they did. They finished top, unbeaten season. They missed out on promotion due to the promotion bracket, but they'll be eager to break into the All Championship. So I think that's their next push. That's their next aim for that team to be able to get through that qualification spot, and qualify for the All Championship next year. So they got high high expectations for this season. Now, the other team to be looking at is the Oakville Crusaders. They finished second last season. They're one of the top competitors since they joined the league in 2024. So very competitive. Not too sure how long this team has been around for. But if it has been 2024, they've been very, very successful so far. They'll be eager to kind of push themselves a bit more, get that top spot, and fingers crossed then for promotion to the All Championship. The third team then to look at is the Hamilton Hornets. They finished third last season. They will need a big push to kind of push themselves into the top 2 spots, as well as the top spot. I believe they were around 10 points behind, so they need 2 extra wins to kind of get themselves over the line into the L, or get the top spot, as well as get themselves into the L Championship. So they got a bit of pushing to do, but I think they do have the capabilities of doing so. Now, if you're looking into more info about rugby in Ontario and across Canada, you got to check out my Instagram at Sean_Ryan_radio. You can get more information about the leagues. I collaborate with a lot of individuals who are photographers or players, or the different unions like the Marshall page, as well as Rugby Ontario. So I'm collaborating with a lot of different people on there. So you can see everything on my page. So you get the photos of the players, the matches, you get insights into kind of how this community is growing in Canada for rugby. So do check it out. and you'll get to meet some fantastic people in the scene that are making rugby so fantastic in Canada. Now we're going to dive into the Owl, the scores, how it unfolded, and then we'll dive into the Marshall. I know a lot of people, if you're coming from Instagram, are very excited to see how I react and how I debrief how all these games went. Um, so we're starting with the L because it's a better light for me, and then we'll get into the Marshall, which is more entertaining for you, I guess. So in terms of the L, we'll start with the Premiership. Aurora versus Guelph. Aurora 24, Guelph 41. So Guelph shows us once again why they're favourites, why they're the top spots, why they've won the league so many times in the last couple of years. It was always going to be a battle for Aurora, but I think they put up a great competition. Based on that scoring alone, I would guess that they possibly got the four tries for that bonus point. So that would be a big plus if that's the case. So this is going to be a good result. Look, if this is the top side you're playing against, if this is the only hurdle you have, and you can win against them at home when Guelph will be at home, that's going to be a big plus for Aurora. But yeah, I think the very good game for both sides. And shows that the competition is quite tight when we're talking about the top three teams from last season. Now, Harlequins versus the Oshawa Vikings. Harlequins 60, the Oshawa Vikings 14. So the Harlequins dominate that game. It was the same last year when I saw them down at the Harlequins home ground. So very, very uh, dominant game performance for them. Now, Oshawa are going to be hoping for revenge later on the season when they're at home. But yeah, they're going to be wanting to build up the momentum and better themselves. Now, for the game that I said, if you're in Toronto, you got to get to this game because I knew it was going to be tight, and it was tight. Was the Toronto Nomads versus the Scarborough Aces? Toronto Nomads 19, Scarborough Aces 22. So, as I said, definitely knew it was going to be close. It was going to be tight. It was going to be compact. I talked about Lucy Brown because we did talk about her on a previous episode, talking about how she's her first season coaching the Nomads. She almost gets her first win here. They lost in the final minutes of the game, is what I've been told. So look, it's definitely a very, very important game. These two teams are similar level based on what happened last year. So I think I'm really excited to see how the encounter will happen when we're at the Scarborough Aces home ground. Is it going to be a similar story, or is home advantage going to take a big um, influence on the game itself? Obviously, it's going to be later in the season. Is the weather going to be an impact? All these different factors are going to factor in. But I'm looking forward to seeing how that all plays out. But I think both teams did a fantastic performance based on the scoreline. For the Nomads to lose within seven gives them that bonus, a losing bonus point. So very important for them on their pathway to not being at the bottom or progressing themselves through the table. So when we look at the standings from the weekend's results, Bradford Harlequins sit at the top. I think there were no surprise there. They've had two big wins. The Guelph Goats in at second. The only difference between these two sides is the points difference. But both teams have a solid 10 points each. Aurora Barbarians in a third. The Scarborough Aces move into fourth. They were sixth last week. They're moving into fourth, which is a big step up. Nomads sit at fifth still. And the Oshawa Vikings then are in sixth. So, a few changes, but very interesting stuff. There's a few movements, which is great. And yeah, really, really exciting stuff. Now, if you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you hit the like button on YouTube, or as well as hit the 5 stars review on Spotify if you're listening on Spotify in your headphones. It helps massively to grow exposure for new fans of rugby here in Canada, get a better understanding of how grassroots works. We do talk a lot about Ontario, but as Canada as a whole, we want to grow the sport. We want to make it bigger. We want to make it better. And this is the year to do it. So if you want to help me, help you, help the scene, 5 star review, hit the like button, share, all that jazz. It goes a long way. Now, when we dive into the Owl Championship, we got to start with this first game, which is over on the east. Belleville Bulldogs versus the Kingston Panthers. Belleville Bulldogs 10, Kingston Panthers 41. So massive win for Kingston. Definitely a different side from last year. Um, 2 wins under the belt now, so fantastic start in that sense. Belleville will have to keep looking for their first win. Um, so they have that challenge ahead of them, but I think they have the capabilities of getting a win sooner than later. So interesting stuff, but Kingston Panthers, big win for them, a big plus. Now, the game at the weekend that I thought was going to be a lot closer, competitive, and possibly a building of rivalries. And we don't have too many rivalries in the women's game, from my understanding. We talked about my top 10 rivalries on a previous episode, and most of them are more tailored towards the men's aspect of the game across the country. And I feel like there wasn't much influence in terms of the women's side of things and where how their rivalries build up and stuff like that. Um, but I think this one is building. I think the Ottawa Irish versus Peterborough Pagans one is building. It's a bit one-sided, but I think there is that kind of edge on edge at the moment. So the Ottawa Irish 83, Peterborough Pagans 7. So I was expecting a tighter game. I think a lot of people were expecting a tighter game. I did hear that Peterborough were missing a few key players. Um, so that might have influenced how tight the game could have been. Ottawa, they keep the top spot on the table, both for their division as well as an overall spectacle. Um, so it's going to be interesting how the reverse fixture is going to play out, how that's all going to unfold. But yeah, I think Peterborough this is their challenge. This is their rival in terms of we want to win against this team. Because if we can win against this team, we have the capabilities of getting ourselves into the Premiership. And this is the hurdle to battle against. But yeah, it wasn't meant to be for them at the weekend, and just didn't fold the way I would have liked it to been a bit tighter, but didn't fold the right way for the Peterborough Pagans. But big W for the Ottawa Irish. Burlington Centaurs versus the Toronto Scottish. Burlington Centaurs 41, the Toronto Scottish 17. So this is another different Burlington team that we saw from last year. I believe they had 3 wins last year. They've already gotten 2 wins and we're only in the first 2 rounds of the season. So very, very promising start. We're definitely going to see something different about this team. Will they be aiming for the 2 top spots to get into that playoffs bracket in their division? We'll have to wait and see, but they are in a very, very comfortable position right now. The Toronto Scottish will still be looking after the long weekend. We've no games next weekend in both the women's and the men's for their first W. But I think they have the capabilities of getting a W sooner than later. So I think, yeah, very important for the Burlington Centaurs for that one. London St. George versus Waterloo. London St. George 5, Waterloo 34. Waterloo starting a winning streak. So they got 2 Ws under the belt. In 2 weeks' time, could they have a third W? We'll have to wait and see. But they're starting that. London St. George still finding their footing this season. When we talk about last season, how London St. George, they started off a lot more positive than what way they're starting this season. They've just fell over a few hurdles. When we talk about this game last year, I was down there at London when this happened. It was a bit more of a bigger win for London. It was more on their side of things. This result is a bit of a shocker. But they did have some challenges towards the end of the season last year, so I think that's trickling in, and we need to adjust for London St. George to be more competitive. So they're going to be wanting to make the changes and be more competitive in this league because it will slip away with them quicker than later, faster than later. Now, as the table stands, we're going to talk about the West because we just talked about the West. Burlington Centaurs in at first, Waterloo County in at second, Toronto Scottish in third, and London St. George in at fourth. Now, in the East, we have a bit of movement. The Ottawa Irish still sit at first. Kingston Panthers move up to second. Peterborough Pagans sit into third. And the Belleville Bulldogs in at fourth. So when we look at the overall owl, what way I predicted in terms of who I think was going to win, 6 out of 7. 6-7. I had to do the gesture. But 6 out of the 7 games I got correct. The only one I got wrong was the Scarborough Aces versus the Toronto Nomads, which, final kick of the game. could have gotten a beautiful 7-7 to start the second week of the L. But I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy that I was able to have an understanding of the league that made it very easy for me to get such an impressive result. Now, before we dive into the Marshall, if you're following me on Instagram, you know exactly how I feel about the results. But I just want to state that you never know how the opening round is going to really go. You just don't know when it comes to grassroots. You just don't know because you could have new coaches, new players. You could have, an absolute brilliant under 18s program that's just brought in these players. You have international talent coming over for, work visa or their, family is from here and they want to come over. All these sorts of factors come into play. So you never really know. And I think the Marshall is a kind of a key space on what that is. I'm also just mentally preparing uh you guys to say so even if I got all the results wrong, which I didn't, not all of them, um, that you just don't really know. There's a lot of factors at play. Um, but we'll get better insight. I feel like I'll be a bit more accurate as we go through the season. But starting with the Premiership, Oakville Crusaders versus the Burlington Centers. Oakville Crusaders 10, Burlington Centers 22. So I had the Crusaders to get the job done. They had better home stats last year, and I expected them to win against Burlington. Um, but it wasn't the case. So congrats to the Burlington Centers claiming the Burlow Cup. This is a cup that these two teams, when they play against each other in the men's competition, they battle for this cup. So the Burlington take home that cup, which is, they'll have to play it again later on in the season and possibly in the playoffs in either the McCormick or the Fall Cup, whichever way it lands. But they'll be looking for revenge on their next encounter for the Crusaders to get the win, especially at the home of Burlington. How sweet would that be for them? So got that one wrong in the predictions. That's okay. Let's look at the next game. Toronto Scottish versus Waterloo County. Toronto Scottish 31, Waterloo County 21. I went with Waterloo County due to the fact that they finished top last season. They looked very impressive. Thought they would bring that over, and I think they did pretty well on the day. Just that the Toronto Scottish were a lot stronger, and they proved me wrong. They proved me wrong on the day. It definitely feels like a different energy from the Toronto Scottish. When you're looking at social media, you can see a different influence, is what I like to say. Like there was a lot of, I kept getting kind of ads to like join the team on Instagram, to like paid ads. Saw a bit more feed on Instagram from the Scottish. So it felt like there was a bit of momentum build up on that aspect of things, which is positive stuff. Love to see it. Now, Waterloo will be looking forward to playing them again in round nine at home, and I think it will possibly see a different story depending on how the season goes and how we go through the rounds. Could we see different, could we see the Toronto Scottish being top team in the league? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, definitely a big win for the Toronto Scottish, and yeah, I'm sorry I went against you guys. All right, two wrong ones. What else? Let's go to the next one. Aurora Barbarians versus Bambi Beach. Aurora Barbarians 33, Bambi Beach 27. Now, I did predict that it was going to be a tight game. I knew it was going to be a tight game. These two teams were fifth and sixth last season in terms of positioning. I knew it was going to be tight. I did have Bambi Beach because they finished on a more of a higher note at the end of the season, so I was kind of leaning towards that. They're a team that you just can't really write them off, just from having so many McCormick Cups. When you talk to every team, they're the team that they want to beat. Um, so there's all these elements at play. But I know Aurora Barbarians got a new home ground. They're settling in fantastically. This win definitely proves that. Um, and they're going to be wanting to build on that. So a big positive for Aurora. Again, apologize I went wrong here. Bambi Beach will be looking forward to playing them again on home soil in round nine. And we might see a different Bambi Beach team towards the end of the season. We might see similar pattern from what we saw last year, where they had a few hurdles at the start of the season and then gained momentum through the later rounds of the season. Now, three wrong out of the three games so far. Number four, please, 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 please. Brentford Harlequins versus London St. George. Brentford Harlequins 47, London St. George 7. So, a small bit of a deja vu moment. If you know what happened last time these teams met, the game was 45 to 7. So, only 2 points of a difference. 2 points. Not exactly, but not 47-7, not a total mimic, but so close that you'd nearly be like, they're nearly the same. Um, so very, very interesting result. London will be moving past this result really quickly. Like Barnford Harlequins are the top side to be looking at if you look at the last couple of years. McCormick Cup wins. Um, they're going to be the team that you want to win against, and like it's a big ask to do that on the opening game away from home. So they're going to be looking past that. London St George going to be looking forward to the next game that they play against, maybe the home game against Bradford Harlequins in round nine. But Bradford start the season right. They start on top of the table, and yeah, pretty good stuff. So, one out of the four I got correct in the Premiership of the Marshall. So, poor start, as you can imagine. Credibility gone out the drain. Like, you're not going to trust my predictions as we go forward. But all jokes aside, a very different start from what we had last year. We had West dominance last year in the opening round. We weren't going to get that exactly due to the fact that we had more of a like West versus West, East versus East kind of style. And there is more West teams than East teams in the league. Um, but will we see the changes in the second rounds, 2 weeks' time? Maybe. Or next week, when this episode airs. Who knows? But I'm certain. One thing is for certain. One thing for certain. I will get one of those games right. I will get one of those games right. Now, when we're looking at the standings, Bradford Harlequins sit at the top of the table. Burlington Centaurs are in its second. Toronto Scottish in third. Aurora Barbarians in a fourth. Bammy Beach in fifth. Waterloo County in at sixth. Seventh then goes to Oakville Crusaders. And eighth then to London St. George. So a pretty decent start for some of these teams. It's week one. It's always an interesting week because you have the next weekend off. So there's a lot to reflect on, a lot of things to change. And we could see a completely different kind of league next week. Um, but in the championship, this is where the fun begins for most of you guys. We'll start with the Bytown Blues versus Peterborough Pagans. Now, Bytown Blues 24, Peterborough Pagans 26. Now, this, I knew it was going to be tight. This was one of the games I said is going to be tight. These are two fantastic teams. I believe second and third last season, if I'm not mistaken. And I picked Bytown Blues to win at home. I just had a feeling, just based on how they've kind of gotten themselves into momentum from last year, that they were going to be strong, and they were strong. Just missed out. Peterborough Pagans got the win. But I think overall for both these teams, I think they got to be proud of the performance. They're two teams that I definitely look up as top sides before entering this or before the start of this competition. So they are two fantastic teams. I think they got to be proud of themselves for both Bytown and Peterborough. I think it'll be interesting when we see the reverse fixture later on when we Bytown play Peterborough at Peterborough's home ground. So there is that, but I think overall, I think those two teams have to be proud of the performance. Obviously, one team a little bit less, a small bit disappointed for Bytown Blues, but I think as a starting, I think it's quite a great start. Now, this next one, Ajax Wanderers versus the Toronto Nomads. Ajax Wanderers 66, the Toronto Nomads 7. Now, before I go into the details and all that sort of stuff, I just want to take a brief moment to say this for Ajax Wanderers. So this is kind of my message. Please forgive me, please. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have went against you guys. Um, and please, I won't do that ever again. Um, but all jokes aside, look, big congrats to Ajax Wanderers. I definitely misjudged you on the performance. I didn't think it was going to be that big. I do think of Patrick Molson as a great coach, fantastic guy. Just didn't go his way on the day for him in terms of taking charge of the Nomads. But also I got to learn on Friday when the episode dropped, or later on in the week after recording the episode, that Ajax have a lot of individuals that are just as talented as Patrick Molson in their training squad. So that was something that probably would have changed my mind a small bit. But if I had the knowledge, but I didn't have the knowledge at the time. Um, so definitely misjudged that one. But 66-7, big result, big result. Nomads are definitely will need to settle themselves quickly. They don't want to fall behind the pack after that result. But it was away from home. There is that element of being away from home. It is a bit tougher. But yeah. All right. 0 for 2. Let's go on to the third game. Markham Irish 47, Oshawa Vikings 65. So first things first, we'll start on a positive note. Our first 100-point game of the season. So didn't think it would happen this quickly on the first weekend of the Marshall. But yeah, first 100-point game of the season in both the Marshall and the Owl. So yeah, dude, just didn't expect it. Um, Definitely was going to be a tightly contested one. And after watching the game, it definitely was that. The scoreline, I think, doesn't really reflect it as well as the game itself does. And I was very lucky that someone sent it to me, the VEO link. And if you do want to send me links in terms of VEOs and stuff like that, you can email it to me or you can send it to me on Instagram, for me to watch the games or just look at the quick highlights, to give me better insight, better, and we get better content then, you know. But yeah, I did go with Markham, home advantage, very strong last year. I think I did underestimate the Vikings. I had them more of a team that was going to finish a bit further down the ladder just on the fact that they just really didn't find their footing last year. But I think I've misjudged that already. Very strong side. It was a game that was kind of like I score two, you score two, and then back and forth, and then whoever was going to run out of energy first, that was where the game was going to be decided. So. But I think both teams are looking like strong competitors this season after that open game, and I think both teams should be proud. I think Markham just need to figure out energy wise how they can stay in the game a bit longer. Because it was towards that end of the maybe the last 20 minutes, the last 15, where it just started to slip away for them. All right, so 0 and 3. Hopefully, can we get one to win? So it doesn't look as bad. No, no, we cannot. Guelph Goats versus the Niagara Wasps. Guelph 40, Niagara 10. I went with Niagara, and this rivalry continues to build because if you've been following along from last year and how I was predicting with Niagara, it was very much a story of if I predicted them to lose, they would win, and if I predicted them to win, they would lose. And we've already started off on a great spot here where I've predicted them to win and they've lost for me. Now I did get a message saying they were missing players. Um, but for me, opening weekend, if you're as big of a fan of rugby as I am, and I know a lot of you guys are, first weekend is so important. So important to set the tone, set the mood. Um, you know, it's a very important game to be there. Hopefully, the missing players weren't, um, you know, like if there were emergencies and stuff like that, very understandable. Or just injuries and stuff. Who knows? But if it's not a game I want to miss. The opening game is not a game I want to miss. As a rugby fanatic, if I'm playing in the game. Um, Guelph also utilized their university players to get a strong start to the season. You know, they have, we saw that university team is unbelievable. And they're utilizing over that, and that's something that I might have put a lighter touch on it because you just don't know. Some players play for their university and then they live on the other side of Ontario or they live in another province. But it seems like they're a bit more homegrown or more staying with Guelph, or living in Guelph, for some of those university players. So a bit of a stronger start for them. They're going to utilize that, and I think That's another team that I think I might have underestimated, but we'll see in 2 weeks' time. Does the break settle a few of these teams, get them into momentum, get on the right path? So I got all four of them wrong. And honestly, I'm not mad about it. I'm just very, very disappointed for sure. I'll the way I'm taking this is, and this is why I'm not crying on camera, is that I'll take it as I motivated the opposition to win. And if you look at it that, I got seven out of the eight out of the entirety of the Marshalls. So not a bad result, not a bad result. But all jokes aside, one out of the eight on the wins, not a very good week. As I said at the start, you never know how the opening weekend's going to go. I also feel the second weekend's going to be the exact same in the sense of it's not going to go the way that I think it's going to go, but who knows? We'll see when I predict stuff next weekend. Um, but yeah, that's the way it is. So in terms of the standings, Ajax Wanderers sit at the top, and it's not due to the fact that it's alphabetical order. They just had a fantastic performance at the weekend. In its second, Guelph RFC. Third, Oshawa Vikings. Fourth, Peterborough Pagans. Fifth, Bytown Blues. Markham Irish sit at sixth. Seventh, then the Niagara Wasps and the Toronto Nomads in at eighth. So yeah, that's how it stands. That's how everything unfolded. We got to talk about the NRU. We talked about how those games went for the Marshall and the Owl. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how next weekend goes. Um, how those results are going to happen, what way it's going to unfold. But yeah, really exciting stuff. So as always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you follow and subscribe wherever you're listening. You can find me on Instagram at Sean underscore Ryan underscore radio. There's also a link in the bio that'll link you to everything, whether it's the Spotify link, podcast, Instagram, or the YouTube the Instagram. And also you can get a discount code on Type 5 apparel. Um, Really cool stuff. You've seen some of the stuff on my page. But yeah, they're just some of the links that you can get access to just by the link in the description. It's also on my Instagram bio as well if you're over on Instagram having a look. If you want to help me cover Canadian rugby even more, you can also support my Ko-Fi. It's in that link. Every little bit helps. It doesn't need to be a massive donation or anything like that, but it helps me, get better cameras, get better computing systems, make it look a bit more professional. You know, all those little things. It just helps me benefit. Um, Run the podcast, keep the overheads, and make good content. So until then, I'm Sean Ryan or Sean Ryan Radio, whichever way you want to pronounce it. Radio Man, the Radio Dude, that guy on Instagram. Um, or you can also call me the guy on Pitchside. But this has been Pitchside. Boom.